That's it. Okay, the record button is on. So we're going to get started. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Cami Jones Friedrichs, and I am the co-chair of the Special Programming Committee. And along with Emily Fopp, who's also co-chair, as well as our Special Programming Committee, we'd like to thank you so much for attending our Research 101 series, where we are focusing on demystifying SLCE research methodologies. Myself, along with my colleagues, are so ecstatic to welcome all of you here today, as well as two wonderful scholars in the field who will share some practical strategies and frameworks for designing rigorous community engaged research projects, but also to really consider, as your place in space and scholarship, how can you improve student learning outcomes and create meaningful impact with community partners? I want to mention a few quick things as we're going through this presentation. So both our speakers are going to give a quick overview of their work and their background. Then with one of our community members and committee leaders, they are going to lead a conversation with two of our speakers. And then after that, if time permits, we'll have Q&A. We're squeezing a lot in within an hour. We know that your work schedules and lives are very busy, but we're so happy to have you here and to have this wonderful discussion at this time. If you have any questions, you can always use the chat and just follow up with our panel discussion. If you have anything that wasn't touched on during that conversation, we'll do our best to try to get to it. So once again, we thank you for your support. And without further ado, I am going to welcome my colleague, Dr. Sahu, who will be followed by Dr. Zulian, and they are here to give you a wonderful presentation today. So, Dr. Sahu?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the great people who have joined us this session. And I'm Dr. Sahu. I'm located in Bangalore, India, and I am an academician. I have been in this field for more than a decade now. And as you all know, I will be speaking on experiential pedagogy and service learning, demystifying research. That's my topic. So I'll share my screen. Sorry. Yeah. So my first experience with service learning was with a class of 75 students, where I was teaching them contemporary social problems. Since I teach sociology, I was supposed to teach them about contemporary social problems, where I had to discuss poverty, aging, population explosion, child abuse, drug abuse, and things like that. And it wasn't an easy task because sitting inside a classroom in a comfortable space, in an urban setup, talking to students who mostly came from middle class and upper middle class background. So it was not an easy task, and hence, I thought of giving them some kind of an exposure to the field. And with the help of another community partner that is in-house, that is Center for Social Action, I just got in touch with few community organizations, and I decided to send my students for a first-hand experience. And this was very much essential because they were also doing a paper on research methodology and understanding research or reading research articles which were in those areas that I just mentioned, right? Like poverty, child abuse, drug abuse. Um, was not an easy task because most of them actually could not even relate to the things that I was talking about in the classroom. So that was when actually service learning worked as a bridge, essential bridge to fill the gap between, the students who actually were living in a kind of a bubble. That's why I call it breaking the bubble. and they had actually a very different way of looking at the social reality. And this particular experiment that I was carrying out, I was not very sure that it was called service learning at that point in time. So, but then the feedback that I got from my students and the reflective assignments that they submitted actually had something to do with, reviewing the syllabus once again and incorporating service learning as one of the key components for that paper in the next academic year. So in the next academic year, we revised the curriculum and we made it 40 hours of classroom instruction with 20 hours of community service with the help of different community partners. So in order
Dr.
to do
Sahoo,
that, as
Dr.
I,
Sahoo.
yes.
Hey, Cami. So sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind shifting your video screen to the right a little bit? We can see it over your slide.
Oh, so should I close
No
it then?
worries. Let's see what happens. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think,
Okay, great.
yes.
There we go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, so as I already mentioned, I started with CSA, that is Center for Social Action, that is a part of the university where I work, and that is our community outreach center. And with the help of CSA, we had Mr. Vinay there. I hope he's also joining the session this evening. I reached out to several of these organizations that I have mentioned here. And we had Child Rights and You, we had Enfold, we had Youth for Seva, we had Janagraha, and Ashraya Seva Trust, and we also had Vimochana. So these through these organizations, what I could do is I could streamline the entire service learning program. And what these organizations do is they work on issues related to children, law, drug abuse, violence against women, and they also actually work with children who come from marginalized community. And this particular trust, Ashraya Seva Trust, works with senior citizens. So we had a variety of organizations to work with, and there are several others, which the students actually had contacted, and they actually approached them and they started working with those organizations, which also worked with special children and things like that. And these were the three main pillars when we were looking at service learning in action. First one was the reflective field work. So this was the first time that students were actually confronting realities directly, instead of reading them in research articles or textbooks, right? And since they were directly participating with the community organizations and communities themselves, they had to develop the skill of rapport building, which is again a very essential component in research. And through this kind of an exposure, they were identifying opportunities for participatory research. And when it comes to the second one, the community partnerships, they were able to identify community partners themselves quite a lot of times. Just now I mentioned that how these were some of the organizations that we were reaching out to, but our students had a lot of other community partners, working with them, because they were the ones who were identifying the community partners. And when we have these community partners working with us, they actually have their expectations. So what we have in practice is the community partners come to the classes and they actually do a session on what are their expectations from the students when they are in the field, right? So adapting to their expectations becomes another requirement for the students, and maintaining reciprocity and relevance throughout the service learning process is another requirement that the students have to fulfill. So these are the things that they had to keep in mind when they were dealing with the community partners. What were the theoretical implications when they were doing service learning? Because that was the key component, the main requirement. First of all, they had to connect the theories that they were learning in the class in the practice or in the field, field experiences that they were coming across. For example, connecting lived experiences to the theory. One example could be conflict theory or inequality that we talk about in many of our conflict perspectives, right? Inequality was not very visible in the classroom when they were sitting along with their friends, but when they went to these communities, which were mostly very marginalized communities, they could actually see um, the inequality, and how people lived in those conditions, right? And this also helped in understanding the researcher positionality. And I'll explain it through another example, which comes later. But yeah, as we know, researcher positionality becomes very, very important in any research work, So the researcher should be able to position himself or herself and then see the world from that position. That awareness is very important, right? And that was something that was actually that requirement was getting fulfilled through this kind of a service learning exposure for the students. So these were some of the steps that we were following, or we are following for that matter. Yeah, service learning program framework. The first thing is investigation with regard to what kind of action is required in the community. And this happens mostly in partnership with the community organization. We don't go there on our own. We go through the community partners, and we try and understand what are the requirements in the community, and then the planning stage starts. And over there we try and see how we will actually bring in funding and other resources that are required to make the desired change. And that planning actually happens mostly along, in coordination with the community partners. And then the next stage, as we know, is the action, where students stay in continuous touch with the community partners as well as the community itself, right? And community mobilization becomes very essential here. For instance, recently we had this health camp in one of the communities, and students had to go and mobilize people, convince them to come for the camp on that particular day. So action becomes very important over here. Without that, the entire process would fail. And then, once the action is completed, that then begins the reflection. And this reflection happens through weekly journals that students maintain. And also, it not only happens in the process of writing, it also happens in their everyday interactions with people around them, right? Because they are discussing about things, they are discussing about how they planned, how they executed, what went right, what went wrong, what were their learnings and things like that. And then comes the evaluation, where they have to put their entire project for up for evaluation. And once this along with this, they also have to demonstrate, that what work they did for the community and what was the outcome of that particular action that they carried out. This happens in front of the community partner and the community itself, right? And this cycle actually in a way ensures accountability, sustainability and relevance, because we are accountable to the community partner as well as to the community that we are participating with. And it becomes sustainable because we are showing that kind of a responsibility, accountability to our community partners. It becomes sustainable. They start building this kind of bond. So most of these organizations that we have been working with, we have been working with them for now more than a decade. And this also retains some kind of relevance because we are, see, social problems keep changing. They don't remain the same over a decade, right? So we remain relevant. Our interventions remain relevant because we carry out this investigation and planning projects every year. We are planning for a service learning program. Yeah. And so what are the outcomes? As I mentioned some of them, when it comes to research, we actually see a lot of action oriented projects taking place. It's not just theoretical, because theory is something that we do in the classroom, and in the field or in the community we actually carry out action oriented projects. And it is also participatory, because it is none of these projects can be actually successful in the absence of the participation from the community and the community partners as well. And this kind of research is also very socially embedded, and they become very meaningful to the students and to the society, both to the student and the society. And next is at the individual
So
students level.
I'm sorry to cut you short. We have 2 more minutes. Would you want to go into the anecdotes or one of the most big highlights that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, yeah, so individuals and community and society, all of them benefit out of it. And these are some of the pictures or images of our student interacting with the community partners here. And here they are engaging in an activity outside classroom. This is the project that they have carried out for the children in a school in the nearby village. And these were some of the small stories that I wanted to share with you. But since we have very little time, I'll just quickly tell you that in one of the reflective essays, I found this girl writing how when she was packing this school bag, a school kit for children, marginalized children in a slum. When she was packing this pencil and eraser, and that is when she could remember that how when she was a kid, she used to lose them quite often, and without her knowledge her mother would replace it. But then here, when she was packing it, she knew that these children will not get another set if they lose this one. So this is what I meant when I was talking about researcher positionality. Sometimes we try to teach researcher positionality to our students in a theory session, but there is no better way than this to make them understand what researcher positionality is all about. So similarly, some students mentioned that how their beautiful world gets shattered when they see the daily struggles of people in the communities that they visit. Um, yeah, and some of the challenges that I have faced over these years is some organizations who do not understand the real meaning of service learning is they often end up assigning our students some trivial task or academically unrelated task. For instance, they ask them to do data entry, which is not related to what they are studying in the classroom. And secondly, I remember one organization which works for the senior citizens asked our students to come every evening and play some cards with the senior citizens. And I thought it's just one day, but that continued every day. And I was very disappointed with the way, the 20 hours were spent for their service learning. It was not adding to their learning at all. So here the purpose of doing service learning is not to make them better in their academics, but also to develop better reflective citizens, in the society. Since we have very little time, can we watch the video?
Maybe
Is
we
that
can
time, or we
paste
can see it later?
the link in the chat box for everybody to watch, and if we have time in the end,
All
we'll
right, all
play
right.
it. I know I'm the
Yeah,
bad person here, but let's listen to Megan, and then
that's fine.
we'll spend a little
Sure.
more time on the Q&A. I think that will be more rewarding for both of you as well.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
And this is one of the articles that we have published, in this particular book, Community Engagement in Higher Education, which is talking about service learning at Christ University, an experiential instrument for community engagement in higher education institutions. If you have time, you can go through the article also. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sahu. All right. Can everybody see that okay? There's nothing blocking. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. All right. Morning, everybody. My name is Megan Zulian, and I'm here to talk a little bit about some of my methodologies, but also just my journey coming into community engaged research as somebody who has all of their degrees in earth science. Great. So a little bit of background on me. Speaking of student positionality and people living in bubbles, I did all of my degrees in earth science and got to do a ton of research as part of this, but it was always researching the physical environment. So I was frequently in communities in different parts of the world, interacting with communities, members there, learning so much from them, but all of the way that my research was formatted and that I was trained was to not really consider them as part of the system, much less research partners. And just like as I participated in research more, it became very, very clear to me just how much they contributed, both in terms of their knowledge and in terms of even just our safety as researchers. I don't know if you can see the snake on the slide and you're wondering why that's there. One of my first jobs as a researcher was to sample termite mounds in Zambia to see if they had higher concentrations of copper minerals. And 3 weeks in, a community member very politely informed me that they are the preferred homes of black mambas, the world's most poisonous snakes. So I had been sent there to play whack-a-mole with black mambas, unbeknownst to me. And if they had involved community members at any point of the process, we would have been very aware of that. Nonetheless, this sort of division between my research and community members is something that persisted well into my PhD. And so I had to find other avenues that weren't sort of my primary research at first to pursue community engaged work. And the first opportunity to do that in graduate school for me was working as a volunteer community scientist with the American Geophysical Union Thriving Earth Exchange, which is a program that basically pairs scientists who are in their bubbles, like I was, with community members who have a serious problem that they need scientific expertise to help them solve or help them address or think through. And so we worked with a community member named Prescott Smith in the community of North Andros, Bahamas, to really assess or evaluate the potential impacts of a proposed limestone lime on, the ocean there, their freshwater resources, the health of their community and citizens. And the outcome of that was actually a policy brief and a community lecture series, which ultimately led to the rejection of the initial mining proposal. And as I was sort of doing that work as a volunteer community scientist, I also participated in this program that really changed my perspective on how I could do research, because again, up to this point, it was pretty segregated from that. And this program was called Public Scholars for the Future. It was run by my previous institution, University of California, Davis. And this was very critically an interdisciplinary program, so people from every department on campus for 10 weeks in this really cohort-based setting, helping us understand that there was really a different way to do our research that was grounded in and equally led by community members. And just to say, this completely reframed how I thought I could be a researcher. And so I was so intrigued by the impact of this program on me and others, and wanted to really know more about what other programs like that existed. And so I set out, as sort of what ended up being the third chapter of my dissertation, to do this national synthesis of programs supporting community engaged graduate scholars. And there are a couple different components of this that I'll walk through. One is sort of this institutional analysis. So like, what institutions are running these programs? What are the characteristics of those institutions? Demography. So really, what are the programs, both in terms of elements and their focuses? And based on that, is there a way to begin to categorize some of these programs? And then sort of in the final context, are these programs likely to address sort of known barriers for community engaged graduate scholars, such as those that I faced and others? And so, again, we're not focusing on all programs supporting community engaged graduate scholars. This was very much specifically looking at university-wide programs that were open to people of all disciplinary backgrounds. I will say there are far more disciplinary programs out there as well that are doing great work. Some evidence of institutional support, whether that's supported by, a dedicated center or another center like, Center for Graduate Studies. Low barriers of entry, so they don't have to have a specific degree or take, 4 prerequisite classes to get into the program. And that, of course, are trying to support students in pursuing community engaged learning and research. And the definition of community engagement that we're using for that is the Carnegie classification definition that I have here. So the first kind of daunting task to this was really how to even begin to locate these programs, because a lot of them, as it turns out, are really not captured in the literature. So at first, I set out to do this Boolean search of a lot of sort of key search terms in the sort of bigger databases, but also individual journals. And from that, I only located 3 programs that were actually discussed in the academic literature. I then followed up with the data that universities submit to the Carnegie elective classification for community engagement. And in there, I found many more programs, so 14 programs from that. And then from there, I ended up doing just more broad internet searches to try to capture even more programs that were not captured in the first 2. And so what I ended up finding is 45 programs total at 28 different institutions. 27 of these have that Carnegie elective classification for community engagement. Again, this is sort of like, is that because they're the chicken or an egg, is it because I was using that data, or is it because those institutions are more likely to have these programs? 10 were private, 18 were public institutions, and of the private institutions, there's everything from small, so less than 5,000 student enrollment, to greater than 15,000. But among the public universities, it was exclusively large institutions, so greater than 15,000. And of the sort of public institutions that are represented, 78% of those are land grant institutions. And so there seems to be some sort of resource and mission threshold that we're seeing. And something I wanted to bring up that is near to my heart is that while there's this really awesome growth in programs over time, especially in years following these elective classifications for community engagement that are maybe serving as a point of reflection for a lot of institutions, there are also a lot of programs that are disappearing. So the very program that I was a part of has since been discontinued because of funding losses. There are a lot of programs that were sort of mentioned once maybe in Carnegie data that then you go, years ago and you go try to find that information, it's not there anymore. So there's also an attrition of programs, and because they're not as discussed in the literature, we don't always have a great sense of why programs disappeared, especially if the contact information for the people who ran them is also no longer available. In terms of demography, what I was looking at was a number of different things for programs. So eligibility, is it only open to graduate students, just senior graduate students? Is it, credit bearing, and then also looking at the proportion of credit bearing and non credit bearing programs, the amount of financial support, the type of funding, also the time commitment. So is the program sort of, 6 hours of a student's time, or in some cases 400 hours of a student's time? There's a huge range in what we see on that, as well as big differences in program length from just a couple of days to multiple years. And so what we found is that there are a number of different primary foci of programs. So curricular, which is more about learning the history and methods of community engaged research and learning. Experiential, which is really about going out and conducting that community engaged research or learning, which is what we heard a lot about from Dr. Zahu. Learning about and conducting community engaged research and learning together, often in progression from more learning to to research. And then the fourth type, which is a little bit different, relational, which is really building relationships with other community engaged researchers, practitioners, etc. And this is a sense of that breakdown, the relational and the curricular experiential definitely being less popular than just the curricular or the experiential. And then that can be further divided into based on the degree of guidance that students are sort of receiving from the people running those programs, from a very, very structured educational program to something that is significantly less structured. So in conclusion, as I mentioned, there are some interesting resource and mission thresholds at public institutions. There are some sustainability concerns for these programs in general that are disappearing while we have a growth in the total number of programs. There's also quite a few that have disappeared. There are these sort of interesting foci that are coming out of this research, and in addition to those varying degrees of learner autonomy. So I'm looking forward to wrapping up this research shortly and hopefully submitting it in the next couple months. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Sudha. This must have been the tightest 10 minutes of your lives. I'm really sorry about doing this. Thank you for everyone who's here. And my name is Finu. I volunteer with the Special Programming Committee. Some friends I see online from last year's meeting at San Diego Yom Kippur Days and the IR Slice team. Welcome, everyone. Before I hand over to Emily for Q&A, I will give both Sudha and Megan the shortest 3 minutes of their lives again. And I want to combine a couple of questions into two. The first one is what began as a myth before you started on this journey of community engagement or service learning, particularly as a pedagogy? Did it break, or does it continue to still mystify you? Am I making sense? Yeah, so that's the first question. Megan, you want to go first?
Sure, yes. I think I answered this a little bit in my talk, but just the sense that people in my field could not do community engaged research, and that wasn't really an option. And I have since realized that it absolutely is, and that there are great examples of people doing that all around the world. And I think something I've learned more recently, which I have yet to quite figure out what to do about, but there are a ton of examples from the global south that just like haven't been translated or paid attention to because of a lot of different reasons. And so I think so it's definitely demystified for me. I think what I'm still trying to figure out are sort of what are those next steps. Because not to be a cynic, but funding structure wise, because it's something that is so unexpected in my field or not necessarily encouraged, figuring out actually how to fund and do and sustain that research is still a little bit, I guess, mystical to me.
Thank you. Sudha, please.
Yeah, so for me, I have been doing this for more than a decade now, and every year I keep getting newer surprises, newer challenges, and newer learnings. So I'm sure that it's going to remain like that because every time we engage with different communities, the students are different, their expectations are different, the community partners' expectations keep changing. And as Megan just now mentioned, the funding patterns also keep changing. So this particular year, we had a collaboration with a club, Rotary Club, which is a very elite club in India. And since we got good funding from them, the kind of activities that we could put up was very different from the ones that we had done before this. So yes, it is still a space that is yet to be fully explored, and every year is a new learning for me as well, and those who are engaging with service learning here. Yeah, thank you.
Cool, thank you. And I also understand that we are a good group of people. This collective wisdom is going to help a lot. But the larger question remains about research being a very lonely journey for some of us, and if service learning and community engagement is a space where that collective collaboration can happen, not just with community partners, but also with our own colleagues. Our students become our mentors in some cases. So what has it been your experience, Sudha, as a mentor and a mentee both? And also, Megan, do you think that you are in a position today to lend your hand and help someone who's just finding their steps here in the space of service learning and community engagement? Sudha, you want to go first?
Yeah. So yes, I mean it's been a very interesting journey for that matter with my colleagues because we have actually institutionalized service learning here in the university, and each department had to do it in their own way. For example, students from the English department go to the slum and teach English to the slum kids, and students from the commerce department go and help the local shopkeepers do their accounts properly. And the learnings that we get from each of this group is very different, and it helps us to learn from each other as well. So and we have a center for service learning in the university. So a lot of co-learning happens in the institutions at the institutional level also. And when it comes to our students, yes, they have been a great inspiration. That's why I wanted to show the video also, because that was not something that was part of their assignment, right? But then they came up with that new idea, and they carried out a campaign in the community with the help of police department, and that was a very good kind of a video that they could produce, and that is certainly going to help many others after them, to experience service learning in a different way. Yeah.
Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, I feel like I have many teachers. So I mentioned before that the program I participated in was cohort based, and I really think I learned as much from my cohort as I did from the people teaching it. I think being in an interdisciplinary program was really fantastic for me to understand how differently my discipline viewed communities as opposed to other disciplines. I think I always assumed that ignoring their existence altogether was the worst possible outcome, but then hearing from folks in social science fields where it's like, oh, making them the subject is not necessarily less problematic, and like here are all of the issues with that. So I learned a ton from my cohort. I also had the opportunity to serve as a teaching assistant to future cohorts because the program continued for a couple of years before it was defunded. And that was also incredible. I mean, I learned so much from the students in those programs, and then being in the seat of somebody who's trying to help develop the program and being like, oh, this part that worked really well for me, like isn't working for these people, and what do I take away from that? So that was great. And yeah, now I feel like I have a much better sense of how to help people frame research questions or identify some community partners to even reach out to and to try to build relationships with. And yeah, and happy to give advice and lend a helping hand. I also recognize that for graduate students in particular, they will be somewhat bound by how supportive their advisors and committees are just because of the power dynamics. And so it's a yes and where it's like I can be a resource and a good colleague, and also based on my own experience, there maybe some glass ceilings, so to speak, there too, and it's important to acknowledge those.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This could go on for half a day. I was telling Cami this is not enough, but I know I'm a very talkative person, so I don't want to take this more. Uh, thank you to both of you for bringing the art and the science of service learning and community engagement together on this platform. I'm sure all of us have a lot of questions to ask, and I always recommend you to watch that video if you can when you're free. It'll give you goosebumps. I also want to mention to Megan that statistics that you put about where it discontinued is really very heartening, and it gives us so much to do and so much is there to also explore. So thank you. I know more thank yous are coming, but may I give it to Emily now? You want to take it forward?
Yeah, thank you, Fanu, and thank you to our presenters. That was excellent, and I'm assuming this amazing group of participants we have online here probably have some great questions for you all. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Feel free to put them in the chat or just pop in with your audio if that's easier. And if we need some warm-up questions, I have some from the registration form that a few of you put in. So I'll open the floor now and see where you all want to start. Okay, I'll get us started with questions from the registration form. One of the participants asked, what is the best way to communicate with faculty members about community-engaged research and its importance to our communities? This was similar to one of my questions. If we had time, I think a lot of times the faculty members don't have experience with community engagement, but their graduate students want to do community-engaged research. There's a lot of challenges that come along with that, as we know, timing and methodologies and all of those good things. So I'd love to hear from both of you, whoever wants to start. What do you think the best way to communicate is?
Can I go, Emily?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so yeah, that's one challenge that we face quite often. As I mentioned during my presentation as well, that sometimes students come up with their own community, partners. Maybe they have been working with them for a while, or they know them through some other source. So actually, we encourage them to continue their work, service learning, with those organizations, but then the conditions remain that they cannot do it at the cost of their academics, and they have to follow all the rules and regulations of service learning. The desired number of hours have to be completed. There has to be somebody in the community organization who will also be a mentor to them and be in touch with the faculty mentor in the university. So these formalities remain, but then we always encourage our students to explore newer opportunities and work with different communities. I mean, there is absolutely no restrictions over there.
Yeah, I feel like I have a few different answers to this, depending on sort of the context. I think, as Dr. Sahu mentioned, when it's sort of an advisor or committee type relationship, like those faculty, the conversation is a little bit different. In some instances, it's convincing them that you can do this work without delaying your progress or delaying your research or dedicating so much time to the relational part of community engaged research that it then, delays progress in other senses. So I think in those instances, really highlighting, the contributions of community and how it makes the research better and just leads to better questions, I think, to the degree possible. But a lot of that ends up also just being trying to caveat it and contained, where you're not making it seem like you're spending like too much quote unquote time on that, which is very tricky to navigate depending on how supportive people are. But I would say I have felt my strongest tactic over the years is appealing to the curiosities of faculty. They tend to be very curious people, and I think curiosity is a fantastic tool to get past people's preconceived notions. And so often phrasing things as like, okay, well, these are interesting questions based on what academics think, but what questions are we missing out on? What questions might we not even think to ask that community members want to ask and want to put forth? And I think for me, that was kind of how I got the best response from people generally, and starting to see perspective shift was by seeing just how great research was, and learning was when communities are involved.
Great. Thank you both. Really great insights there. I appreciate those responses. And what you're saying, Megan, kind of leads into the next question we have here, which is how can we move from treating communities as research sites to recognizing them as equal knowledge producers, ensuring their voices? Big question that we ask in our field all the time, I'm sure. Do either of you want to take a stab at that one?
Should I go first? Okay. So I'm a sociologist by training, and for us, we really don't know anything. We actually prefer going with a very blank mind to the field. I hope I'm making sense. So we don't try to do any kind of value-loaded research when we enter into a community. So our community is the biggest teacher for us. They tell us what we should study about them. So this has been a practice for us even when we are conducting service learning assignments with our students. If you still remember what I said during my presentation, I was talking about how we actually do some kind of a research before taking up action, right? And during that process, we go to the community and try to understand what are their challenges from their point of view. And only then we prepare the action plan based on their requirements. So they have always been our source of knowledge because nobody knows what they are going through better than they themselves, right? So that is why we do not look at policy documents, we do not look at government reports. We go to the community and try to understand what are their requirements from the community partners or from the kind of action that we are trying to carry out with them. Yes. So yeah, they are always the source of knowledge for us. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I see there being many different strategies to this. I feel like one kind of groundswell background, not even background, but just like broader strategy is to continually uplift different types of knowledge and different methodologies, like tribal methodologies, for example. Just different continuing to work at elevating different types of knowledge to the same level as academic knowledge in the eyes of our peers, even if we already perceive that to be ourselves. I feel like that's a really um, strong and necessary collective push that's happening right now. And I think another way that I at least have felt that I can be effective in this way is being a translator back and forth between, okay, this is the community question, which is usually very applied and very specific. And can I use the academic words to translate this to the exact same question, but just worded in a way that my colleagues might appreciate in a different way? And if you can be that go-between and help people see just the degree of overlap in interest and intrigue and what people are curious about. I think that role of being the translator can be really impactful for that push as well.
Well said. Yes, thank you both. I'm going to pause for a moment to see if there's any questions from the audience before I jump into our last couple. Okay, kind of a nitty-gritty question for you both. If you have experience with this, what advice or tips do you have for designing community-engaged research project assignments for online asynchronous courses?
That's a very tricky question. Because when we went on during the pandemic, we were actually, we had to put our service learning modules on hold. That was the only time we had to, stop our service learning modules. So it's quite hard for me to think about a kind of an assignment for students who are doing it online. So I will request Megan to go first so that I can just think about it for a while.
All right, well, I'm going to cheat and talk about some of the programs that I've come across instead of ones that I've been a part of. So I will say there are some great, oh gosh, what's the platform? edX. There are some great classes on platforms like edX that have actually developed, community engaged learning, fully online asynchronous classes. And so I would say I can circulate some links to those if I can pull them up. I know that I think Cornell has one, University of Michigan has one. And so those are some great examples. And what I found in those is that there tend to be a lot of, I guess what I'll call like community voices type projects, or essentially like interviews with community members. So people are granted gaining that through, watching an online interview, but it's a way to at least somewhat mimic the interactions that folks would be getting with community members and the types of things that community members might like to say. And there are also entire just like online projects that are not necessarily a part of a specific class. In my field, there's one called Coastal Voices, which interviewed tribal elders along the west coast of the US, looking at the impacts of sea otter introduction and what, these sea snail populations used to be and urchin populations used to be historically, and what they were after these conservation organizations introduced sea otters, and basically tons and tons of online interviews where you can go and see different community perspectives. So that would be my ideas. If you could, preemptively design a research project around that to create, generate online content for your classes. Really small things here. Just kidding. It's a ton of work, but yeah, that would be my thoughts on that.
Do I really need to respond to this question? Okay. Yeah. If it's an online asynchronous class and I have to give assignments to students, then it would be mostly engaging with some community, which is in their place where they are located, and also submitting their weekly journals, the reflective journals, regularly. That will be their assignment, because through those journals we can actually make out how engaged they are, how involved they are with the entire project, and what are their learnings from there, right? And that can help us to guide them develop a very strong research proposal on any one of the themes that they are working on any of one of the issues that they are working on. Yes, that is something that I can think of.
Great. That was a tough one to spring on you. Thank you. Great ideas and some really great links in the chat too. Thanks to Fanu and Cami for those. I have one final wrap-up question. If you want to spend at least 5 minutes at the end or a couple minutes at the end with some announcements, but in just about a minute or so, if you want to answer this last one, that would be great. Do you have final thoughts around lessons learned or things you wish you knew as you embarked into this space? Any final best practices to consider? So what nuggets would you leave us with here?
I will just say that as somebody who is very much a disciplinary outsider, to just not, I guess, to be very unafraid of jumping into it. And especially if you can find some mentors. I've had really great mentors who have been super encouraging of me diving into methodologies that I was very unfamiliar with, and really knew when to sort of nudge me towards sort of different academic backgrounds, or to think about things differently and less like a earth scientist in my training. And yeah, so to just be unafraid and to seek out as much mentorship as you can find.
Yeah. So one thing that I think that if I had known earlier is one thing is to have a lot of community partners who work on diverse areas of research. That could have helped me to help my students learn various different things rather than sending them in large numbers to a few organizations. So that is something that I have I have faced this challenge quite often, where I find it very difficult to connect to few organizations on, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, the kind of projects that they have, the kind of expectation that they have, the kind of timelines that they give to our students, it just it doesn't match with our expectations. So I wish that the community and academia have some kind of an understanding with which we can actually enhance this entire process of service learning, which helps the students, the community, and the community partners at the same time. Some kind of an understanding between these three. You know, that's what I would respond to. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great note to end on from both of you. Thank you so much for those insights. Um, I want to wrap us up here by thanking both our presenters and facilitators today. Such a great session, so many thoughtful stories and insights from you all. I'm definitely leaving myself with some deeper reflections and inspiration for my own projects. So thank you for sharing. The Special Programming Committee is already planning for the next session that will expand on this topic, so I hope you all will stay tuned for registration and details coming soon. Watch those newsletters. And I want to invite Susan Harris from the Scholarship and Publications Committee to pop in and share another complimentary program from her committee that's coming right up.
Hi, everyone. First, I just want to say thanks to the speakers for your really wonderful presentation. And yes, thanks for giving me an opportunity to plug our event, which is next month. It's Thursday, November 6th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, so at the same time as this, but on a Thursday. And I'm so pleased to see how well it actually builds off of some of the conversations we've had today, especially your work, Megan, trying to bridge scholarship in STEM fields. So the webinar we're organizing is called Beyond the Usual Suspects, Service Learning and Community Engagement Scholarship in STEM. And we have 4 amazing women who are going to be speaking about their experiences trying to bridge that gap. We have Berta Paz Lorido, who is a physiotherapist in Spain and has done all kinds of interesting interdisciplinary work. We have Perla Lahana Myers, who is a mathematician and leads the teaching center at the University of San Diego. We have Talita Torrezan, who's on this call, I think, who is an engineering PhD student in Brazil. And we have my colleague at the University of Southern California, DJ Cast, who is a elementary STEM education specialist and who does a lot of science translation work. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation about how these women have made their way in fields that haven't traditionally, seen connections between community engagement and scholarship. So I think it'll build nicely on this, and I can plug information. I don't think registration is set up yet, but it should be soon, and hopefully Tiana from Meyer Slice will be sending out more information about that.
Wow, very cool. Thanks, Susan. What a neat international panel you've put together. That'll be a great conversation. Yeah, thank you. One more quick announcement, and I think Tiana just put it in the chat too. If you haven't already heard, Slice is inviting members to serve on the board of directors. So nominations are open until October 15th. If you're interested, go to that link that I think she posted in there. A great place to find those mentors that Megan was talking about, and lots of inspiration around community partners and research. So I hope you'll consider that. And if there's no other announcements, we'll end right on time here and close for today. Thanks so much for joining us. And I hope to see you all in future webinars. Take care.